December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor, territory of Hawaii. Before the sun even crests the ridgeline of the Kolo Range, the air already carries a strange, low tremor. An unnatural hum that seems to vibrate against the ocean's surface. Sailors on the decks of the USS Arizona, Oklahoma, and West Virginia glance upward instinctively, squinting into the pale dawn. The smell of oil, salt, and wet metal hangs heavy, as it does every morning. But today, something else rides the wind. An uneasy stillness, a silence so sharp it feels like the pause before a lightning strike. Far above, nearly 200 miles north of Oahu, another world exists. One the Americans never expected to face. A floating empire of steel, 6 Japanese carriers slicing through the Pacific swell. On the flight decks, hundreds of aviators in flight gear stand by their machines. A 6M0s, B5N Kates, D3A Val's engines idling like caged predators. Every pilot knows the name behind today's mission. Yamamoto. The man whose plan was called arrogant, reckless, even impossible. Below deck on the Akagi, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands over the plotting table, hands behind his back, face unreadable. The red glow of the ship's lamps catches the deep lines around his eyes. He listens to reports without a word. Some officers believe this attack will shock America into negotiation. Yamamoto believes the opposite. He knows he is about to awaken a giant. But if war must come, he intends to strike the first blow with such force that the Pacific will tremble. Hours earlier, aboard the battleship Nevada, Seaman First Class Daniel Harper had watched the harbor quietly rippling under the moonlight. For weeks, rumors floated among the enlisted men. Japan was planning something, maybe in the Philippines, maybe in Thailand. Nothing serious, though. Every officer he'd heard speak dismissed Japan's naval capabilities with an almost amused confidence. Carrier strike at Pearl, they laughed. They'd have to be suicidal. Impossible. But Yamamoto built a plan on the very assumption that America believed such things. Now, as the first orange streaks of morning light slip across Battleship Row, Harper hears it. A strange, growing roar. Not thunder. Not engines from Hickam Field either. Something heavier. Closer. Aboard the Akagi, the final signal snaps through the air like a spark. Commander Mitsuo Fukuda steps toward the open deck, a scarf wrapped around his neck against the icy wind. His voice steadies as he prepares the words that will ignite the Pacific War. Pilots advance to attack. The deck crews spring into motion, chocks pulled, hands signaling frantically. Then, one after another, planes roll forward and leap into the sky. The first wave of 183 aircraft begins its descent southward, a black swarm against the pale vault of dawn. The second wave waits behind them, engines howling like a rising storm. Back at Pearl Harbor, the sense of wrongness sharpens. Harper sees dark shapes emerging from the north, glinting against the morning sun. He narrows his eyes. Birds. Training flights. But these shapes move with purpose. Tight formation, low altitude, a hum swelling into a growl. A bugler on the Arizona pauses mid-note as he sees it too. His mouth goes slack. The first formation breaks. Sunlight flashes across rising sun roundels. What the hell, someone shouts. Then the shriek of diving aircraft tears into the sky. The first bomb screams downward, slicing the quiet morning in half. It hits Ford Island with a thunderclap that shakes the harbor. Smoke erupts in a towering column. Shock ripples across Battleship Row. An instant of stunned disbelief. Then chaos detonates. Sailors stumble, shout, scramble for ladders and hatches. Machine gun nests snap awake. Officers bark orders drowned by explosions. The Nevada shudders as torpedoes slice into her port side. Men are thrown to the deck. Oil erupts in black geysers. Harper runs for cover as the air becomes a furnace of splinters and smoke. High above, Fukuda circles in his Cape bomber, watching the attack like a conductor viewing the opening crash of a symphony. He grabs his radio, voice ringing with triumph. Tora! 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 The coded signal for complete surprise. On the Akagi, the message hits the radio room and echoes through the decks. Officers cheer. Yamamoto does not. He simply closes his eyes for a brief moment. He knows the blow is stunning, but not fatal. And if America survives today, it will not forget. But for now, Pearl Harbor is a hellscape. Bombs bloom across the harbor like molten flowers. The Arizona erupts as her forward magazine ignites, a fireball rising so high and so fast that sailors on nearby ships are blinded by the flash. A shockwave punches outward. Men are hurled into the water, thrown across decks, knocked unconscious by the blast's fury. Harper dives behind a steel column as shrapnel screams past. The sky is a swarm of enemy aircraft. Dive bombers plunging almost vertically, torpedo planes skimming dangerously low, fighters raking the decks with machine gun fire. All around him, the belief held by U.S. commanders, that Yamamoto's plan was arrogant and impossible, is dissolving in fire and steel. What was once confidence now burns in the oil-choked water. The giant has been struck. And the men living through this moment know the world will never be the same. Smoke rolls across Battleship Row like a creeping black tide, swallowing masts, cranes, and entire decks as the first wave's attack tightens its grip. Every explosion seems to shake the very bones of the harbor. The once still, mirror-like water now churns with fire, oil, and desperate swimmers struggling to stay afloat. Seaman Daniel Harper coughs violently as the blast from the Arizona settles into a burning rain of debris. Charred paper, twisted metal, even fragments of deck plating flutter down around him like macabre snow. His ears ring, his eyes burn, but his instincts scream at him to move. A petty officer grabs him by the shoulder and shoves him toward a mounted .50 cal machine gun. "Get that damn thing firing. Move, Harper." Harper leaps into the gunner's seat, hands scrambling across the cold metal. His fingers tremble as he racks the charging handle. The gun feels impossibly heavy. Like lifting a steel anchor. But adrenaline gives strength. Above, a Val dive bomber howls downward, its siren wailing like a banshee as bombs detach from its wings. Harper squeezes the trigger. The gun thunders. Empty brass rains down. A bright arc of tracer fire reaches up toward the incoming aircraft. He can barely see through the smoke, barely breathe through the burning air. But the sight of return fire brings a flicker of order to the chaos around him. On the West Virginia, Ensign Carlton Pierce sprints across the tilting deck as the ship begins to list sharply to port. Torpedoes have torn massive holes beneath the waterline. Every compartment he passes is filling. Some slowly, some like giant buckets overturned into the sea. He throws open a hatch and shouts inside. "Everybody out. Move, move, she's sinking fast." A chorus of voices answers. Some panicked. Some calm. Some simply coughing. Men climb out, soaked, burned, limping, one carried by two shipmates whose uniforms are scorched black. Pierce helps drag them forward as another torpedo slams into the hull, nearly throwing all three overboard. Across the harbor, the second torpedo attack run begins, skimming so low across the water that their wingtips almost touch the waves. Anti-aircraft guns finally roar to life. Bofors cannons pound, and .30 cal mounts rattle. But the initial disarray cost precious minutes. Pearl Harbor was not prepared for war. Not this war. Back toward the carrier strike force, Admiral Yamamoto gazes at the horizon through binoculars, listening as damage reports roll in from the attack leaders. Even through static, the excitement of the aviators is unmistakable. The surprise is total. The American fleet, at anchor. Their planes neatly lined wingtip to wingtip at Oahu's airfields. Ripe for destruction. Yet Yamamoto's face remains carved from stone. He knows the danger of pride. He has studied America. He has toured its cities, spoken to its officers, watched its factories roar like furnaces. He knows that if this strike is not decisive enough, if even one American carrier escapes, it will return someday with a vengeance. For now, though, the Pacific belongs to Japan's rising sun. Back at Pearl Harbor, the Oklahoma groans like some massive wounded creature. She has taken multiple torpedo hits, water rushing into her hull faster than pumps can fight it. Hundreds of sailors are trapped below decks, pounding desperately against the steel as the ship begins to roll. Crewmen outside claw at hatches, shouting to friends trapped inside. "Hold on. We're cutting you out." But the ship tilts again. And again. Screams echo from inside the darkening hull. Then, with horrifying slowness, the Oklahoma capsizes completely, her massive keel rising into the air like some gigantic tombstone. Sailors dive into the water to escape the suction as she disappears beneath the waves. Harper watches it happen while firing upward at a zero streaking past. The image sears into his mind. The ship turning over, the shouts, the unbelievable finality of it. Some part of him understands in that moment, the U.S. Navy he knew is dying right here in front of him. At Hickam Field, Japanese strafing runs turn neat rows of P-40s and B-17s into flaming wreckage. Pilots sprint desperately toward any plane still upright. But fighters swoop down like hawks, guns blazing. One airman hits the ground, clutching his leg over him, the shadow of a Zero passes so close the prop wash throws dust into his eyes. Near the submarine base, a massive explosion shakes the harbor. Another bomb hitting the Helena. The concussion knocks Harper off his gun. He hits the deck hard, rolling through a puddle of burning oil before scrambling back to his feet. He hears voices yelling nearby. Medics rushing with stretchers, sailors dragging wounded men from the water. The harbor smells of smoke, gasoline, blood, and scorched salt air. And through it all, the Japanese planes keep coming. In the skies above the madness, Commander Fukuda circles for a clearer view, watching fire spread across Battleship Row. His gunner shouts updates, pointing toward another plume of smoke where the California now burns. The entire horizon seems aflame. Fukuda allows himself a rare smile. Lines of tracer fire strobe upward, but too few, too scattered. The attack has unfolded exactly as Yamamoto envisioned it. Below, Harper reloads and fires again. The gun kicks violently. A Zero bursts into flame and spirals into the sea, but another immediately takes its place. He feels utterly outmatched. Every gunner on the row is fighting with the intensity of a cornered animal, yet it feels like throwing pebbles at a storm. Another explosion rocks the harbor. Another ship begins to list. Another alarm bell rings. And still, the rising sun fighters dive. Pearl Harbor is breaking. And the first wave is only halfway through. The sky, already choked with smoke, grows darker still as fresh shadows race over the burning harbor. The drone of engines deepens. Louder, heavier, unmistakably more numerous. Those still fighting on the decks look up with a dread that cuts through even the chaos. The second wave is coming. Atop the Nevada, Daniel Harper clings to the railing as he reloads his .50 cal, his hands streaked with soot and oil. The air tastes metallic, every breath a mix of burning fuel and salt water. Nearby, a chief petty officer shouts into a voice tube, trying to relay damage reports through the noise. But even he stops mid-sentence when the new formation appears. Dark silhouettes emerging from the cloud bank like a fresh swarm rising into battle. One sailor murmurs, "God help us, there's more." And then the bombs fall again. Val dive bombers peel off their attack runs, screaming downward with a shriek that cuts like a blade through the harbor's bedlam. Their wings glint in the smoky half-light, red circles flashing as they roll into near-vertical plunges. Machine gun rounds stitch across decks, sending sailors sprawling. The deck plating under Harper's boots shivers as the Nevada takes another hit, this time from above. A massive explosion erupts near the bow. A column of water and fire roars upward, soaking the gun crews as if a hurricane has suddenly landed on the ship. Men are thrown across the deck. Harper ducks instinctively, the blast pressing against his back like a giant hand. On the bridge, officers shout conflicting orders, get underway, beach the ship, fight fires, but nothing is clear. Black smoke pours into the superstructure. Flames dance across oil patches on the water. The Nevada, wounded but still afloat, begins to inch forward through a channel now thick with wreckage. Not far away, the California struggles to stay upright. Her crew fights to counter flood compartments, but the damage is too extensive. Water pours in faster than pumps can compensate. Inside, sailors move through pitch-black corridors, feeling their way along walls slick with fuel. Emergency lights flicker, then go out completely. In the dark, men call out to each other, their voices echoing through the flooding decks. Outside, the second-wave torpedo bombers break formation, swooping low. Several torpedoes streak toward the fast-moving Nevada. But she dodges just in time, the deadly wake slicing past her hull by mere feet. The second wave, unlike the first, is focused on finishing what has already been crippled. And on destroying anything still shooting back. Aboard the Maryland, Ensign Robert Harper, Daniel's older brother, leans over a shattered compass repeater as he barks coordinates to fire control teams. He has no idea his brother is fighting less than 1,000 yards away. The Maryland's anti-aircraft batteries hammer the sky, their barrels glowing. Crewmen pass ammunition in frantic chains, boots clanging against steel decks slick with water and debris. "Keep firing. Keep firing, damn it!" Robert shouts. The guns roar again. One of the attacking valves bursts into flame as a shell strikes its wing root. The bomber spirals downward, smoke trailing behind it. The crew cheers, but their celebration dies as another bomb lands close aboard, the concussion throwing several men off their feet. On the Japanese carriers to the north, Admiral Yamamoto receives updated reports. The second wave reports heavy smoke, increased anti-aircraft fire, confusion among American ships, but still massive damage. The pilots speak with almost euphoric certainty, the U.S. Pacific Fleet is being gutted. Yet Yamamoto feels his shoulders tighten. He asks a quiet question to his operations officer, "Has there been any sign of American carriers?" The officer hesitates. "None, sir." Yamamoto looks back toward the burning horizon. That, he knows, is the danger. He has achieved surprise. He has struck a blow unmatched in modern naval history. But if the U.S. carriers are not here, then the future remains uncertain. The blow is powerful, but incomplete. Somewhere in the smoke above Oahu, Commander Fukuda leads the second wave, zigzagging between rising pillars of flame. His gunner calls out each new ship hit. Fukuda spots a cluster of American destroyers firing at impossible angles, their crews working with ferocious determination despite the inferno around them. Persistent, he mutters. But too late. He banks his aircraft for another pass. Below him, the Nevada, now attempting to escape into open waters, becomes a prime target. Bombs bracket her path. One slams into her deck just aft of the bridge. The explosion knocks Harper off his feet again. When he rises, dazed, he sees the men ahead of him dragging the wounded across the deck. His ears ring. The Nevada's bow begins to dip ominously. "Beach her," an officer screams. "Beach her now." The ship turns sharply toward the shallows near Hospital Point. Harper grabs the side railing as the Nevada scrapes against the bottom, grinding to a halt. Smoke pours from nearly every opening. Men spill over the sides, leaping into the oily water or lowering wounded onto waiting boats. Back across the harbor, the Tennessee, surrounded by the burning wrecks of the West Virginia and Arizona, finds herself boxed in, unable to maneuver. Flames lick at her hull as crewmen desperately spray seawater across white-hot steel. Everywhere, the scene is the same: fire, panic, courage, and destruction. The second wave does not last long. Barely 15 minutes, but it feels endless. Each explosion blurs into the next. Every dive bomber seems to carve deeper into the American fleet's bones. And when it is finally over, when the last Japanese plane rises back into the clouds, a terrible silence begins to settle over Pearl Harbor. Not the silence of peace, but the silence that follows a scream. By mid-morning, the smoke over Pearl Harbor has thickened into a dark, choking canopy. Sunlight struggles to pierce the black haze, turning the harbor into a molten, shadowed world. The first wave of devastation is already burned into the memory of every sailor who survived. The second wave has left its mark as well, carving death and chaos into the fleet with surgical precision. The calm assumption of America's command has been shattered, replaced by an overwhelming, raw horror. Seaman Daniel Harper floats in the water, drenched in oil, coughing, and blinded by smoke. Around him, the wreckage of the Oklahoma and Arizona drifts like the remnants of a shattered dream. Bodies float nearby, some clinging to life, others gone in an instant. The cries of the injured and dying echo across the harbor. Harper fights to reach a small launch, pulling himself over floating timbers as he mutters prayers under his breath. From the bridge of the Nevada, officers scramble to assess damage. Ensign Robert Harper steadies his shaking hands on the railing, eyes locked on the twisted silhouettes of neighboring ships. The West Virginia lists badly, oil slicks surrounding her, while the Tennessee is ablaze with fires that refuse to be contained. The sheer scale of destruction is almost incomprehensible. Dozens of men are missing or trapped, the dead already mingling with the water and oil in a grim testament to the morning's violence. On the Japanese carriers, Admiral Yamamoto studies the reports with clinical precision. Every target hit is logged, every ship damaged or sunk accounted for. His pilots speak with excitement, recounting each attack, each dive-bombing run, each strafing pass. Yet Yamamoto's eyes are hard and distant. For him, this is not a victory to celebrate. It is a strategic strike, a necessary but dangerous gamble. He knows America will recover. He knows the industrial might and spirit of the United States are vast, capable of producing ships, planes, and men faster than Japan can destroy them. Today's triumph is immense, yes, but it is only the beginning of a war he fears, one he did not seek, but now must see through to its end. Back at Pearl Harbor, smoke and flame mingle with the acrid scent of burned oil and metal. Sailors continue to scramble, pulling survivors from the water, dousing fires, attempting to salvage what remains of their shattered fleet. The harbor itself seems alien. A graveyard of floating wrecks, burning ships, and shattered aircraft. Aircraft hang twisted on hangar decks or are scorched beyond recognition, the once proud airfields reduced to smoking ruin. Planes that survived lie scattered, their wings broken, engines twisted, ready only for scrap. As Harper and other survivors climb onto a partially submerged dock, they see the magnitude of the assault in full. The Arizona, now a smoldering, broken hulk, sends columns of fire and smoke skyward. A grim beacon of the morning's destruction. The Oklahoma, having rolled completely over, rests like a dark tomb in the water. The West Virginia, partially sunk, leaks oil that spreads across the harbor, reflecting fire and sky in an eerie, moving mosaic of destruction. It is the kind of scene that will haunt dreams and define history. The concentrated fury of a man's plan, carried out with brutal, unrelenting precision. Despite the destruction, some moments of heroism pierce the horror. Sailors form chains to save trapped shipmates, medical officers work tirelessly to treat the injured in improvised wards, and small teams risk everything to prevent further fires from spreading. These acts of courage, though overshadowed by the overwhelming scale of loss, highlight a resilience that will come to define the American response in the months and years ahead. Yamamoto, high above the Pacific in his flagship, is already planning the next moves. The success of Pearl Harbor will grant Japan temporary dominance, but he is acutely aware that it is not an endgame. The United States, humiliated and enraged, will regroup, rebuild, and respond in ways even the most meticulous strategist cannot fully predict. The assault on Pearl Harbor, brilliant in its conception and execution, is merely a spark. The fire it ignites is far from under his control. By noon, the roar of engines has faded, leaving a haunted quiet across the harbor. Smoke drifts in long tendrils, and the water is dotted with wreckage and struggling survivors. Across Oahu, emergency sirens wail, signaling that the city and military installations are awakening to a new reality. The arrogance with which U.S. commanders had dismissed Yamamoto's plan has been obliterated along with their ships. The unthinkable has happened. The Pacific Fleet, anchored and confident, has been humbled in a single, devastating morning. The magnitude of the attack is impossible to fully grasp in the moment. Hundreds of men dead or wounded. Battleships sunk or disabled. Aircraft destroyed. Facilities devastated. And yet, amid the horror, there is the first stirrings of resolve. Harper, bruised and soaked, stands on the dock, staring at the twisted silhouette of the Arizona. Pain and shock surge through him, but so does a quiet, stubborn determination. The day may be lost, the fleet shattered, but he understands, in that moment, that America will not remain down. And far to the north, Yamamoto allows himself a fleeting thought, a reminder that even the boldest, most precise strike carries consequences. The giant has been struck, but it is only sleeping, not dead. And when it awakens, it will come for him. By late afternoon, Washington, D.C., is a city gripped by disbelief. In the high-ceilinged offices of the Navy Department, telegraphs click relentlessly as reports arrive from Pearl Harbor. Officers hunch over maps and charts, tracing the destruction with hands that tremble in a mix of fear and fury. Admiral Husband E. Kimmel stares at a sketch of the harbor, noting each ship destroyed, listing, or damaged. Beside him, Lieutenant General Walter C. Short, commanding the Army units in Hawaii, paces the floor, the weight of surprise and unpreparedness pressing down like a physical burden. Newsboys had started shouting the headlines on the streets: Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. Men stop in their tracks to buy papers, read aloud, share rumors that sound almost unreal. The words feel like fiction. Something crafted to shock, not a factual account of war. But the incoming messages, the telegrams, and now frantic phone calls confirm it. Ship sunk. Sailors dead. Aircraft destroyed. Entire squadrons vaporized in an hour. Inside the Pentagon, Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox slams a hand onto the table, scattering papers. His voice shakes but carries steel. This is war. And we were blind to it. Aides scramble, taking notes, dictating urgent orders to hastily mobilize any available forces. The disbelief that marked the early hours of the morning has transformed into grim urgency. It is clear that Yamamoto's audacious plan, dismissed by U.S. commanders as arrogant and impossible, has succeeded beyond imagination. Kimmel and Short convene a council of officers to assess the scope of disaster. Each report seems worse than the last. The Arizona, Oklahoma, West Virginia, California, Nevada, Tennessee, and Maryland battleships that represented the pride of the Pacific Fleet are either destroyed, heavily damaged, or immobilized. Aircraft counts are staggering, hundreds of planes lost on the ground, with hangars reduced to smoldering rubble. Entire airfields, including Hickam Field, Wheeler Army Airfield, and Kaneohe, are decimated. In private, Kimmel's anger is masked by professional restraint, but his thoughts are unrelenting. How could we have been so blind? Radar reports had detected incoming aircraft hours before the attack. Observers had seen blips on scopes. But misinterpretation, complacency, and assumptions about Japanese tactics had left the fleet vulnerable. The arrogance of American commanders, believing a strike of such precision and audacity was impossible, had sealed the Pacific Fleet's fate. Meanwhile, across the country, President Franklin D. Roosevelt absorbs the news with a mixture of shock and resolve. His aides update him with casualty figures and damage assessments. Roosevelt's face hardens, jaw tight, as the enormity of the situation unfolds. A carefully calculated plan of neutrality has evaporated in one morning. The nation's sense of security, the belief that the Pacific Ocean itself would shield America is gone. The reality of Yamamoto's brilliance and daring cannot be ignored. The Japanese admiral, previously dismissed as arrogant, has executed the most devastating naval strike in history, and the psychological blow to America is nearly as lethal as the physical one. In Honolulu, survivors continue to pull themselves from the harbor waters. Fireboats battle flames, sailors drag the wounded from oil-slicked waters, and volunteers risk themselves to prevent further destruction. The chaos is mirrored in the reports trickling into Washington. For every hero saving a life, there is another record of death. For every ship partially salvaged, another lies broken, listing, or smoldering. And in every corner, the same question reverberates: how could they have been so unprepared? From across the Pacific, Japanese communications report the success to Tokyo.